I don't require accolades or 5-star reviews or people kissing my feet to be a valid artist.
What's going on, everybody?
You can do other things and you can explore different aspects of yourself and you can become a different person.
You can't use your voice, lift someone else's voice up.
Understand that you are a global citizen and you do have a responsibility.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Life Outside the Box podcast. I'm Abby.
And I'm Asante.
And I'm Matthew.
Matthew is our amazing guest today, speaking about his new book, Until We Break, and the pains, trials, and tribulations it takes to be an author. And we are very excited for you to hear this. As always, thank you so much for Camco for sponsoring this video. I guess just before we, dive into the real questions, just, tell us a bit about who you are. Why are you here and what are you up to?
For sure. Hi everyone. I'm Matthew, and I am a young writer. I'm in my 4th year at Western University, doing a double major in SASA and English language and literature. And recently, I've just come up with my debut novel, which I'm very, very, very excited for, and be looking forward to people reading it. Thank you. People reading it and enjoying it and telling what they think. And I think this year has been really great because with my book coming out, I've also been appointed as the student writing residence at Western. So I've been doing a lot more creative work as of recent. Thank you. And it's just amazing to see for me, everyone rallying behind creative efforts, and I'm just feeling really blessed and honored and glad that I get to share this story and this journey, and I get to talk about it on this platform. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So, my first question for you is, why writing? What motivates you to write? Why did you decide to enter what can be a very challenging endeavor?
I think it's interesting because I don't think it was ever a choice for me. I don't think I ever chose to write, and that's because very early on, when I was growing up and I was young, I was always invested in storytelling. I loved stories. I was the kid that would read. That was my thing. Everyone knows that kid that reads just constant. That was me. And so yeah, so you too. Go ahead. So that was just where I started. And then after reading a lot, I then began to think more about, okay, these are the stories that I'm reading and interpreting, but is there anything that I might want to share? And that answer obviously became a yes. And I began to answer that as I grew and I learned and I challenged myself. I started reading more widely and gaining more experiences. I was I think I do have actually something to share with the world. And of course, Wattpad was a huge, I want to say, tool for that as well, because as an free kind of platform that's so open that you just open the website and you can write and there's no strings attached. That for me was really pivotal for me as well, because then it became, okay, I might have something to say, and if I say it, there are no world-ending repercussions. You know what I mean? It's very not low effort, but low risk. And yeah, that's kind of how I shifted into it.
I love that you mentioned Wattpad. When I was middle school and early high school, I was on Wattpad 24 hours a day. And it honestly, for a website being that accessible and having that much art as well as really crappy written fanfics, it's just a great website. And I know we mentioned beforehand, but I'm in my 2nd year undergrad of a creative writing degree. I was also that kid that read all the time. And, I've started to write a little bit of my own stuff. I'm very curious. Was there one author or a few books that inspired you to write? Because I know you mentioned in your Quill and Quire interview that, you were just a reader and, you one day you were like, well, I can do this. Yeah, what books or author just inspired you to write?
Wow, you've done your research. Quire interview. Yeah, I remember it quite vividly actually. So I'm gonna set the scene for us. I was young, 13, just entering my teenage years. Like in Jamaica, we start high school at age, no, I like grade 7. So it's grade 7, just entered high school. I'm sitting down in math class, not paying attention as I do. I'm in the back of the class and I'm reading, actually, as the teacher is teaching. I am reading books. And I was reading, I believe it was Clockwork Angel by Cassandra Clare. And I'm seeing some nodding. And I read a specific line, and I can't remember exactly what the line was, but I remember it struck me so hard that I was like, that feeling that I just felt after reading that, I want to distribute that onto other people. Like, it was incredible. And I think from that moment on, I was like, okay, I definitely want to start writing. Like, and it was huge. And that was a moment for sure.
I know exactly what you mean.
It's funny. As you said that, I remember being in a creative writing class in my second year of university, and the question was, why do you want to write? And that was my answer, is I want to give people the feeling that I get, right? So very relatable. So yeah. What was the first thing that you wrote?
Ooh, oh no. Okay, I wish I could forget, but I can't because my friends always bring it up. But I mentioned Wattpad earlier, and I started on Wattpad, of course, and a lot of my works are still there, and I'm still like active in that community. But one work that I've since deleted from Wattpad that will never see the light of day ever again was a little fiction story. Like my first attempt at writing a novel, it was not very good. It had like aliens and magic and spaceships and like action scenes, and it had a lot going on. And it was terrible. So it's something that I wish I could never think about ever again. But my real life friends that like follow me on my pad at the moment never fail to bring it up. Like, I'm pretty sure they have screenshots. So yeah, that was the first thing I ever wrote. It was called, actually I won't even say the name, let's just let it rest in peace. If I don't name it, it can't hurt me. Like, I don't give it power, so that's what I'm going to just leave it unnamed.
Yeah, I'm also refusing to share the first Wattpad story that I wrote because that does not need to be seen by anyone. My next question is, I'm really curious about your writing process, because I know there's some authors that are like very strict, like 4 a.m., like, write for 3 hours, don't do anything, and then I'm kind of just like, I write when I'm feeling inspired. I don't really stick to a routine. What was your routine or process like when you're writing your novel?
Good question. I am also the exact same way. I hate to get into a routine because I feel like writing is not something that you can predict. For me, it's creativity and it's evolutionary and it's fluid and changing. And I feel like if I try to stick to a schedule or stick to a routine, then I'm caging the art, and that doesn't do myself or the art justice. So I write when I feel inclined to write or when I have the time to write. Sometimes that looks like, for example, like maybe like 2 weeks ago, for like a week straight, I spent like almost 2 hours a day, every single day, just writing. And that's just because that was in the headspace I was in. That's rare. Sometimes I go like 2 months without writing a single word. But I think leaving myself open to not setting a routine is what has kept me going. That way I'm entering my craft with little expectations, and I'm allowing whatever feels the most natural to enter the page. With that being said, of course, deadlines are a true thing and are real, but I've been lucky enough to work with some amazing people that are flexible with deadlines. And that's something to be mindful of, but I try not to let that apply too much pressure, because as I said before, I think it can like affect the art in really harmful ways.
That's definitely true. I was reading something the other day that said that, you still, despite the fact that you may have deadlines or whatnot, you still have to write as if you're free, right? Despite that, when I was writing a lot of creative stuff, I used to have a routine, 11 p.m., midnight, that's when I would really get to it. So you have a novel. correct. So,
Yeah.
can you tell us a little bit about the novel? Just give us a synopsis, and then maybe we'll dive into it a little bit more.
Okay. So my novel is called Until We Break, available everywhere that you buy books. And it is a coming of age story about a young dancer who her best friend passes away. But her best friend also passes away right as she's about to enter the biggest dance competition of her life. So in lieu of kind of accepting grief or taking charge of all the feelings that she's feeling about that death, she keeps training for her career. And she keeps trying to go for her goals. And of course, that results in a really bad breakaway point where the main character, Naomi, experiences an injury that forces her to stop dancing. So now that Naomi can no longer dance, she has to come to terms with all the feelings that she's put aside and buried. And also she's forced to think about who is she outside of dance and her best friend and everything else that she thought she was.
I know a lot of authors, some authors that I've read online are very like no self-insert characters. And then, I mean, I self-insert some characters when I'm writing, but I am curious to see to know if any of your characters in your book were like an intentional self-insert character, or, they just kind of reflected you in ways that surprised you, if that makes sense. It's kind of a long-winded question.
That makes sense. I think intentionally there wasn't any self-insertion going on, but I do think that I am the creator of these characters, and I think in some aspects of each of them a little piece of me lives. Some of them are very, 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 very different from me, from race to age to gender to class to so many other factors, but I think that just by the mere fact that I made them, we share a little piece of each other. Maybe that's not something that's easily identifiable on the surface, but at their core, I think we're pretty similar.
So, I'm very interested now. So, again, we don't want to give away the book because we want people to go there and read it.
Please.
Right. And I'm going to buy it. Trust me, I'm going to buy it right after this. That said, sounds like Naomi goes through, a very difficult time where she's challenged in terms of looking at identity. What I've heard so far is that one of the challenges Naomi is experiencing is that she is, I believe, the only Black woman in her troupe, in her ballet troupe. So could you maybe say what impact that has on the character a little bit, or just kind of flesh out a little bit of Naomi and what she's dealing with? Just, give us a little bit more to kind of see what's happening in her life.
Yeah, for sure. So that's a lot more context, because whereas Naomi is the only Black dancer in her ballet academy, she's only that way because Jessica passed away. Jesse's also Black. So I think their friendship was really, really strong because they shared that experience together and they were able to relate to each other. Amongst like a number of the things that were very similar, that was a big one. So with Jesse passing away, Naomi's also like, okay, wow, I really am on my own now. And I think that's really big because for the first time, Naomi's forced to stand on her own feet and see her race in ways that, because she's more isolated than ever before. So she has to see her race as truly the role that it plays in the academy. And it brings up, like, for her, how it's played a role throughout her entire dance career as an infant to this day. It also plays a huge role because Naomi she comes from her mom, she's Jamaican and her mom's Jamaican, but her dad's white. And so there's a lot of conversation around like colorism, not only within the academy, but how that affects Naomi. Because even though her dad's, I don't want to get too much into it, but it creates a lot of conflict because based off of how people see Naomi and how Naomi sees herself and how Naomi thinks she should be seen by other people, those are all three very different concepts, and all of them kind of bounce off of each other within the novel. And that's all I'm going to say.
That's a follow-up real quick, Abby. Thank you for sharing that. So you shared with us that, you're from Jamaica and you came to Canada, when you're 19. I'm also from Jamaica, but I came to Canada when I was 2.5 years old. So I've been here most of my life. What I've heard from folks who come from rather homogenous places is kind of the shock of realizing how differences contextualize in a new place. In what ways, if this is true, has that experience of coming to, moving from a place that's rather homogenous to, a place that, being in London, Ontario, probably, it's not as diverse, of course. Do you think that experience for you motivated what these characters are experiencing in your book in any way?
I don't think I've ever been asked that question before. I'd say probably. I think moving to London, Ontario, for me, it was really big because, as you said, like Jamaica's a rather homogenous place. And I think race functions a lot differently, especially in a post-colonial society, because in Jamaica, for example, we don't experience migration in the same way. People emigrate, but people don't immigrate to Jamaica. Like, people don't come into Jamaica to live very often that aren't Jamaican. So even though racial differences definitely exist, the Jamaican culture is like everyone can relate and experience that together, and everyone grows up knowing that, and the grandma knows that, and their great grandparents know that, and so it's very united on that front. But here it's a lot differently. Like, race plays a much bigger role because immigration is huge, or like people like bring cultures like from like their home countries, etc. So I think it's played a really huge role because it got me to really think about the ways that global citizenship can play a larger role in North American countries. So I got to thinking more about like what ethnicity does. So like, for example, Jessie in the novel is Black, but she's like African American, and Naomi's Black, but Naomi's Jamaican. And also their that ballet instructor Valentino is from Europe. So I got a lot to thinking about, like, for me, how that affects the way that they speak, how they relate to each other, and just in terms of like how they see each other as well, because it's all different, but at the same time I think that can inform the narrative in very interesting ways.
Has this story been something that you've kind of been subconsciously holding on to for a while, or was it more of like a burst of inspiration?
That's another good one. I think subconsciously I was holding on to the story for a while, but it was not, and I think this is how I approach my storytelling in general. I think the ideas aren't fully formed, and they like take a long time to ferment and really get there. So I think I didn't know that I wanted to eventually tell a story like this, but I had no idea what it would look like. And then I get like a watershed moment where the whole thing comes to me and I'm like, okay, I see it. This is how it's going to play out. And then I start writing it. So I think you're absolutely correct. Like, I do think subconsciously I knew I wanted to tell the story. I just wasn't sure how.
So how do you reconcile with that feeling, as you start to dive into the process of actually putting it on paper? How do you reconcile with, all these feelings of how or what and all these things that come about when you're in the process now?
That's a really good question, because I think I still do that every single day. And I think it just comes down to the fact that for me, and I spoke about this a little bit before, that I think writing is not something that we can cage or control or predict. And so I began to rely a lot more on trusting the process and knowing that sometimes I might not be able to figure out exactly how I want a specific conflict to play out, or maybe in what ways I want to discuss a theme. But I tell myself that eventually will come to me, and it's what I know right now that I should be able to focus on and be able to flesh out and expand and explore. And sometimes it takes different forms. Like, there are times when I might not know exactly what I want to talk about or how I want to talk about it, for example, and I sit there and I like go through it and I comb through it and I like put in the work and I think critically and I stare at the ceiling for hours, or I like take a walk and I think about it. And that's a very like rigorous process. And sometimes it does require that, but it does not always require that. And sometimes I just tell myself that it's not coming to me right now, but I have trust and faith, and I know that it will, because it always has. And I live my life until it does. So those are the two kind of methods that I use to approach that. But that's an excellent question. No one's ever asked me that before.
Did you have a specific goal in mind when you were writing this? Like after the first draft and, the editing phase? Yeah, did you have a certain goal in mind, like that you wanted your readers to get or grasp?
Absolutely. I think from the very beginning, the very first draft, the very first word even, I'd say that for me, until we break, I wanted people to take away that we are subject and allowed to change. I wanted people to know that it's okay for us to evolve. And sometimes evolving is hard. And sometimes we evolve in ways that we never expected that we would evolve. But that doesn't go to say that it's not okay and fine and normal and natural and a great way of evolving in general. And that's kind of what I want people want, that we're changing and we're always changing, and that's okay.
So what evolutions have you experienced in your life, and what have you learned from them?
Oh, wow. Many. Many. Okay, like I'd say like a huge one would be like moving to Canada, for example. I did not know that I would end up in Canada. Much similar to Naomi and her journey. Like, I'm sure she never imagined a world where she, at that age, would stop dancing for that specific reason, which she did. Just like myself, I ended up moving to a completely different country all by myself. Didn't see that coming. And so that kind of relates in the way that I think when we change, it's not just ourselves that are changing, but it's the path that we're on that changes as well. And I think that sometimes throws us off, and it like gets us into, oh no, like what am I doing, or like who am I, or like where am I? Is this what I should be doing with my life? As I said before, like trusting in yourself is the most like important thing. And I want people to know that just because things are changing, that doesn't always mean that that's a bad thing.
Have you changed or, evolved since publishing your book? How has that affected you? If it has.
Definitely. I think because it's not been a very long time. It's only been like a month and a couple of weeks, maybe like a month and like 2 weeks or something. But I mean, it's taught me a lot about the publishing industry. It's taught me a lot about what it means to be a creator today in terms of like feedback and speaking about your work and other people receiving your work. And I think those have been some very key things. But I think the most important thing that it's taught me is that I started writing because I love to write. And that's it. That's all I really need. Like, I don't require accolades or 5-star reviews or people kissing my feet to be a valid artist. I love what I do and I love my craft, and holding on to that seed is very, very, very important. And I just constantly go back to that idea because it's been so much has happened since then, but at the core of everything, that's the most important. So
how did you arrive at that place? I'm curious because, the thing that's always been difficult for me as a creative person is, when you're creative, essentially you're kind of putting a lot of yourself out into the world. And that can be challenging to receive that feedback or to feel like, does anyone care about this, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. So how did you arrive at that place where you were just able to accept that this is who I am, I'm a creative, I'm going to put it out into the world, and regardless of the reception, I'm okay with that?
That's also a really good question. I think it came with time. And you know what too, actually, now that I think about it, I think starting on Wattpad was huge because Wattpad's a platform that's not traditional in the sense that there are comments on creative work. Like prior, or like in like more traditional senses, if you're writing a work, like the only way that you know what people think is they like email you or send you like a letter or leave a review on a website. But in Wattpad comments, like as people are reading along, line by line, people are giving their feedback. And so starting my writing journey on a platform like that had feedback so critical to the way that I wrote, meant that I got to see very often how people interpreted or misinterpreted what I was writing. And I think that just gave me the guts to be like, okay, it's fine. And I think more when it came to like sharing it offline and like in person and like having people in real life read it, it's kind of the same thing. Like I grew up seeing that so often, and now I'm seeing it more. And I think the more I see people receive my work in so many different ways, I've been okay with that. Because related, I also write poetry, and I share that like when I spoken word and I speak at events, etc., that I've been blessed enough to speak at. And I always think it's so funny how people receive what I'm saying. I think people like, either people think it's like extremely literal, or they think it's like way more metaphorical in senses that I didn't necessarily intend. And I think it's a beautiful thing that we can take writing and we can like interpret it in our own ways. I think that's amazing, but it also gives me comfort in knowing that people are going to receive it in the way that they receive it. And sometimes it's not necessarily as transparent as I'm going up and I'm sharing this and people are seeing me, because people are seeing it through the lenses that they interpret things through. So that's a very long answer, but
That's
Great
good.
answer. It was a great answer. Thank you.
When you were talking about grounding yourself, and you know that you don't need these 5-star reviews and people kissing your feet to feel like an accomplished author, and it reminded me of something my professor said my very first day, my very first year of university. He said, some people live to write and some people write to live. And I kind of want to get your interpretation on it. Very curious.
some people live to write and some people write to live.
It's a very loaded statement.
Very loaded. I think,
Or if not your interpretation, then like, do you live to write or do you write to live?
I think I honestly write to live, because I cannot go through a single experience without writing about it. Even if I don't share it, like even if it just lives on my computer or my notes app or in my like books, I cannot go through life without putting something to paper. So I think I said right to live, right? Yeah, I think I write to live.
Yeah.
So that I can, yeah. And also like too, on top of that, to kind of lengthen my answer a little bit, when it comes to very complex situations or emotions, I oftentimes cannot understand them if I don't write about them. I can't digest or deal with them oftentimes if I don't like sit down and write how I'm feeling or like make it into a poem. And I'm even like closing my eyes because I'm like visualizing all the things that I've been through. But sometimes that's like putting it down and like creatively expressing it as an outlet helps me understand my own perception about what I'm going through.
That's actually very relatable for me, you know, as someone, you know, who writes poetry and rap lyrics. You know, it's the only way for me to really access what's really happening for me. So that being said, you know, one of the difficulties I've had with writing fiction has been getting into the emotions of the character, because I need to feel them in order to write them. For you, what is it like for you to, you know, get into the character, you know, write dialogue, you know, bridge people from this, you know, you're writing about a difficult experience that the character is going through. What does it feel like for you to go through the process of those aspects of the fiction process?
Yeah. It's very emotionally taxing. Because I agree. I think for me, the writing is most powerful when you are also kind of in the same space as the characters that you're writing about. So sometimes the character is crying and I'm crying, and we're both crying together, and I'm writing it, or like they're laughing and I'm laughing, and I think it's a beautiful thing, but I also think it's it's extremely emotionally taxing. Um, that's the only response I can give. Like, it's tough, but I think it helps the writing and it helps the craft and it helps the storytelling. And I haven't found a way around it. So we're still going with that for now.
So how do you keep going? Because for me, I don't write fiction anymore because that emotion is hard for me to manage once it starts to bleed into my regular life. How do you keep going?
I think that's a good question. I think over the years, I've really come to separate myself from the work when it matters. So sometimes I'll write, for example, a very emotionally taxing scene, like something very traumatic has just happened, and I'm writing about the character experiencing for the first time. Once I feel like I've written and I've explored that emotion and I've dealt with that emotion and it's on the page and I've written as much as I can today, I close it and I turn on something that makes me laugh. Or what I really love to do is I leave the house or leave wherever I'm writing at to get into a completely different environment. And usually getting in a different environment gets me in a different headspace, and I like see the world differently, and I come back to my own reality and not the reality that I was just in. So I think for me, it's been a lot about like shifting gears and also knowing that I'm living a different life than the life that I'm writing about. And that separation is really, really important for me. So
I'm very curious, Matthew, what is your favorite part of writing? Like dialogue, the overall narration, the description? Like, what do you love to write? And also, what do you hate to write?
I think I appreciate all aspects. I think it changes very frequently. Like sometimes, and I think it also depends. Like sometimes I prefer the description. Sometimes I prefer the dialogue. Sometimes I prefer setting the scenes, and I prefer talking about like the more emotional sides versus like the exposition. It all depends. But you mentioned what I hate writing. I don't want to say hate or despise or loathe, but I just keep going, imagine. No, but I am averse to writing plot outlines. I know they're necessary, especially for like me, that I just need to like get things done and like see the light at the end of the tunnel. But I think they're so tedious. And as I said before, like I just hate like caging myself in. And I feel like that's like me building myself like a cage. But I hope that answers your question. I appreciate all aspects, but what I like the most is like plot outlines.
That's sorry, Abby. Do you have a follow up? So it's interesting. I've been reading Stephen King's book about writing, and his process is that he doesn't write plot outlines at all. He just lets the character, take life of its own. That being said, writer's block, a thing that writers experience. How is that for you, and how do you get through it?
I think, and this is why it's important for me to set up writing without expectations, and set up writing in a way that it is something that I can leave whenever I want and return to whenever I want, because of writer's block. It comes in sometimes the most like inconvenient times of our lives, and that's not, as I said before, something that we can control. But when it comes to overcoming it, and I think this takes like the exact same two-pronged approach. I either write through it, like especially if I have a deadline and I don't have a choice, like people are waiting on me to get this done. I either sit there and I like set a timer and I go and just don't stop, or I like do exactly what I said before, where I just I'm like, okay, well, nothing's coming to me and I'm okay with that, but it will eventually.
How did you set up this novel? Did you like have like a chapter outline and you're like, okay, this is, by page 100, this is where the story's going to go. End here, conclude here, whatever. Or did you just like open the document and let it come naturally?
Um, Good question. I do remember what I wanted to say before though. So the other thing I want to say to about writer's block is what also helps is I think how I overcome it is I take what I need that day. So if I'm like trying to write through the writer's block and I'm actually tackling my problems instead of running away from them, I like it depends. Sometimes I like write on the floor, or I'll write on my bed, or I'll write in a library, or write in a cafe, or I'll listen to music, or I'll listen to a different kind of music, or I'll listen to music without words. I just have to like switch it up so that the goal or like what I'm trying to write that day is emulated by my physical being. And that usually helps slip me into the focus that I need. And Abby, your question on how I wrote the book. Yes. Yeah, so as I said before, like I hit plot outlines, but I do need them. I I hate building myself the cage, but I need some type of direction because otherwise opening the document to just the white page alone is like extremely daunting and scary to me, especially if you're like, because okay, in my head it's always okay, like I'm writing this, like okay, I'm writing a short story. Short stories are usually what, like 5K to like 10K words, okay, and I open the document and it says 0 words and you're like, crap, I have to write 10,000 words from nothing. But if you like start with an outline, then you're like, oh, like I'm breaking it up into pieces, like okay, like this is gonna be 1,000, I can do that, and then that's gonna be another 2,000, or like, or even if the outline is gonna get casted away, at least you have a document that has like 150 words on it. Then you're not starting from 0. You're like, okay, I put something down. Maybe I'm not going to use any of this, but it's a lot easier for me than like 0. You know what I mean? So
Cool. So no, I have a very big question. As a writer, do you think about legacy? And if so, what do you want yours to be?
oh wow, I do. I do think about legacy. Funnily enough, Naomi in Until We Break also talks a lot about legacy. But I think for me, I've always said that I wanted my legacy to be authenticity and kindness. And I think those can look a lot differently, depending on context. But I want that at the end of reading my work and going through hopefully many more books, the common theme that will always ring true is that the message that Matthew is sending came from a place of him being authentic to who he is at that time or was at that time. And it came from a place of kindness and love. And yeah.
I think you are completing that legacy, even when you were talking about, feeling accomplished as a writer, no matter the star reviews or how many critics or whatever. I guess, we're kind of wrapping up here, but one thing that I've been wondering is like, if you could not like sum up your book in one word, because that is like, hard, and I'm not going to put that pressure on you. But if you could, in a short little description, what does your book represent? Very open-ended question, but do with it what you will.
I was talking about this recently with a friend, actually. So thank God I had a little pre-work done on this question. Otherwise, I would have been lost for words. But I think my book represents, I'm looking for the best way to describe this. I think it represents challenges that each of us can relate to. And when I was talking about this with my friend, the word that I used was exemplary in terms of deriving from the word example, because I feel like the novel and what my characters go through, even though it might not be the most at the surface relatable thing. For example, like Naomi's a ballet dancer. I don't dance ballet. Like, do you? Like, there's so many other like various things that like not everyone can like specifically relate to or like has experience with. But like at the core, like at the complete essence of who they are and what they want out of life at that age, I think that is exemplary of all of us and all of who we were at one point. When we talk about like being like 16 and 17 and like wanting to move out or wanting to go to university or college or wanting to get a big career or thinking about what does adulthood even look like for me? Like, will I be able to like achieve my dreams? Will I get success? Thinking about all of those things, I think, and even like thinking about who we are in like our hometown and in our family and in our schools, like dealing with all of that, I think that's something that we can all relate to. So there we go.
That's amazing. What have you learned about yourself after finishing your first novel?
I've learned that I can finish a novel. Because I did not think, there were many times that I didn't think it was possible because it's so hard, right? Like it's like tens and thousands of words. But on a serious note, what I learned was that a little bit of passion and hard work and dedication can go a really, really, really long way. And I use that because I remember when I was going through my final round of edits. Let me set another scene for you. I feel like this is very like full circle. We started with me setting a scene, and now we're ending with me setting another scene. Set the scene. So I'm in my like apartment. I was doing study abroad earlier this year. So I'm like in my Barcelona apartment, supposed to be having the time of my life in Spain. But instead I'm like cooped up inside writing this book because I have my deadline coming up. And I'm writing and I'm writing and I'm writing and I'm writing and I'm writing. And I'm like, oh my God, this is the final thing. Like, this is what is getting published. Like, will people like this? Will people receive this? Like, is this any good? Like, do I know what I'm doing? Like, is it done? Like, should I be doing more? And I was talking to my agent, God bless her, for even entertaining me and spiraling. But I was talking to her and she was like, what are you talking about? None of us would be here. You wouldn't have an entire family and an entire team behind you if this wasn't a story that needed telling. And we're all telling you that it's something that we love and that we share, and at least you can have a little faith in us. And so the novels taught me a lot about trusting myself, knowing that there's something, like if I feel like there's something that I need to say, there's usually something that I need to say, and trusting myself that I can say it and I can say it well.
That is a beautiful answer. Oh my God.
Very inspiring.
What would you say, having all this experience, and I believe you said you're at the end of your degree?
Yeah, I'm in my fourth year, yeah.
Yeah. What would you say to someone who's considering or entering a career in the arts? Because I know there can be a lot of disencouragement when it comes to that. So what would you say to them?
I'd say the world needs artists right now, more than ever, arguably. And usually the people that are telling you that it's impossible to make it as an artist aren't artists and don't know the first thing about being an artist. When I talk to other artists about if it's feasible being an artist, everyone's like, of course it is. Like, and I don't think you need to have like a #1 New York Times bestseller. And I don't think you need to like be writing for a Netflix show. Like, success in art looks so many different ways for so many different people, and it works. And the world needs us. And sure, it's not traditional today, and it will take a lot of blood, sweat, tears, and elbow grease. But if you love it and you want to go for it because we need you.
Young writers, to be a writer itself is a brave thing. To be a young writer, I think, is braver. What would you say to young writers who haven't written yet? What advice would you give them?
I'd say think about what it is that you want to say and say it. And don't let your youth get in your own way, basically. I think a lot of like the pioneers of art and of change have been young people, and it's been done before. You won't be the first and you won't be the last, but instead you will be in a long, long line of amazing artists that have made it. So literally, as Nike said, just do it. Like, go for it.
I love it. My final question, Matthew. What are you reading right now?
Good question. Actually, over here. Well, I'm reading many things, but I think, can I stand up? I do have on pants, but I'm like, I'll just tell you. I'm reading.
We can edit that out if you want. No worries.
Okay, I'll start up honestly. Like, it's not even that serious. Like, I'm fully wearing actual clothing. Okay, I'm reading these two. Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo. Love. She won the Man Booker Prize in 2019. I've been meaning to go through it. I'm almost done, but this book is incredible. And I'm also reading, like, in a more nonfiction sense, Sister Outsider by R.J. Lord. Who doesn't love some R.J. Lord? And I think there's a lot that we can all learn from R.J. Lord. So I'm dedicating some time to learning from her. And yeah.
Amazing. Well, anything that you want to say before we sign off today?
I think only two things. One, buy my book, please. On Tubi Break, available everywhere. Buy it for yourself, buy it for your mom, your friends, your other family members, your kid. Like, just buy it, please. And if you want to follow my writing journey, I'm very, very active on Instagram and Twitter at MatthewD_writes, WRITES.